Welcome, faraway friends. Thank you for joining me once again. Today we're going to be talking about portraying the archetype of the ignorant demagogue, real crowd pleaser. First, I want to give a brief addendum to the first video portraying a the crumbling patriarch. And what I wanted to add there was that there is often, so I would put this as like a strong optional feature of the crumbling patriarch archetype, that there's often a denial of their diminishment, of their ongoing diminishment baked in. If they're a ally of the players, then that can be kind of a cause for contemplation and sadness, maybe even like have a mournful undertone to it. Even the mightiest go down sort of thing. And then if they're an obstacle, definitely if they're an antagonist, but even if they're just an obstacle, like a benign, sort, you still have the situation where you have to convince them of their degrading abilities, or not, or it's as fixed as the North Star, and so then you just have to work around it. But anyway, I wanted to get that in there as often a frequent but not necessarily essential feature of that archetype. Right. So, ignorant demagogue, a lot to say here. And at the end of this, I'm going to add a new category, which is how to portray this archetype, because I think that's also going to be useful. All right. So, themes of the ignorant demagogue. Well, first off, if you don't already know, so a demagogue is someone who, by definition, plays to the crowd. They draw their strength from the crowd. They are kind of a twisted version of a motivational speaker, where the motivation is to further their own interests and to gain power. All right, so themes are self over others and style over substance. And those can go hand in hand. Of course, there can be other themes, but these are just like some common natural themes for this type: self over others and style over substance. Some of the key features are obviously this person, and could be male or female. This one really can go either way. Key features are that they're of course self-serving, that they have no core principles other than their own advancement or their own political prospects. That they're keenly aware of their image and how others perceive them, whether or not they acknowledge that. So the more intelligent ones may not necessarily cop to it, but they always have their finger on the pulse. And they need to be portrayed with pretty keen instincts for them to be effective, or they're not going to be an effective demagogue. And then, a deep instinctual understanding of a disaffected populace. And this is kind of the secret sauce that makes the demagogue. Because when everybody's happy and there's no chaos and the institutions of the civilization are working well, it's not really fertile soil for the demagogue. Then they, honestly, probably then you would just call them a rabble rouser. So, someone who raises hell to raise hell, but they're not really going to be that effective. You've really got to have they've got to have some they've got to have some sort of point of leverage to get into the society and start working the crowds. And then I starred this one, and this is important because we need to differentiate this archetype from it's not a twisted, it's an evolved form or a light form, if you will. So the critical one there is that this person lacks wisdom or compassion, or true compassion. They lack wisdom or true compassion. They might be extraordinarily good at faking compassion, or they may just pay it some lip service and then move on. That really kind of depends on the individual. Because if they have many of these characteristics, or at least the capabilities that I'm going to be outlining and that I've already alluded to, and they are wise and they do have true compassion, you're much more likely to be looking at some flavor of visionary. That's not in my initial 12 that I'm going to be doing of archetypes, but it's definitely something I could get could get into. Kind of most of these are kind of more have the flavor of like antagonists. Not all this initial 12, but I find that that's kind of where you get the most juice for the squeeze. All right. So the optional features, they may secretly be quite well educated. They may loathe the common folk, who are the source of their power, and or hold them in contempt. So those are there. And then another one that isn't down here, but that occurs to me, is that much like the vizier type who's pouring poison at the ear of the crumbling patriarch, the demagogue may or may not be, the ignorant demagogue may or may not be a tool of an outside force, either knowingly or unknowingly. And those are just, up to you as the storyteller, kind of what serves your purposes. So their function in the Chronicle is to be a true societal level threat. They can turn the public against the player characters. They can disrupt or destabilize the status quo without an idea of what actually comes next. Refer back to not having wisdom. And on a personal level, actually, let me kind of group all of those social ones, and then we'll get to the last one on a personal level. So these characters can actually warp the setting society if they're allowed to metastasize and really allowed to get in there. They can actually change the course of a campaign, and probably not in any way that the players want to see happening, because typically in a long-running campaign, as players advance, I'm going to be kind of assuming D&D here, but it doesn't have to be D&D. It can be really any game where the players have longer-term goals and they're trying to build something beyond themselves, beyond just being successful kind of in physical combat. If you think about it, they basically always need some sort of stability, right? So if you're going to open a tavern, or if you're going to start a mail service, or if you're going to revive a lost religion, and you're going to try to start a new order, like these are all things that you need some sort of cultural underpinnings for. And so if you're having unless the point of the character is revolution, but typically player characters, good aligned player characters, are on the side of the status quo, even if that means greatly reforming the status quo or even transforming it, but they're usually not on the side of burning it all down. That's usually in a villainous campaign. This is assuming heroic campaign. Villainous campaign, then obviously your mileage may vary. But anyway, so character can do that, and then just from a less party-centric standpoint, you also have a situation where the players don't necessarily want their home nation or their hometown or whatever in chaos or in peril, or having whatever deleterious effects the demagogue plying his or her craft is going to wreak on that location. And then on a personal level, an interesting kind of side effect of the ignorant demagogue's influence is that this could even sour long-standing ties with other NPCs. So if there's an NPC who falls under the sway of the ignorant demagogue, that's been a longtime ally or a trusted contact or something, but they come to really it's not a decorous way of saying it, but I think it conveys the point, drink the Kool-Aid, then you can have problems. Then you can have characters, NPCs, probably not PCs, but NPCs who at least become suspicious of the party, if not actually devolve from being an ally all the way to kind of a secondary antagonist. So there's definitely some narrative gas there to be had. All right. A lot to say on how to portray, because I was trying to think about what are things that don't require professional level voice acting, which I certainly don't have. Most of us don't, and don't require us to be incredible rhetoricians or orators, because a lot of us don't have that talent. Although you definitely do get better with practice, and part of being a good GM and a frequent GM, just getting your reps in there, is you actually will become better at flow, at your verbal flow, especially once you get out of your own head and you just kind of let the story go. So when you're portraying this character, so this is kind of talking to you as the storyteller, never be constrained by the truth. So most of us have an innate, or learned, however you look at that, desire not to just bald-faced lie and chuck that out the window when you're playing this character. This character lies as they breathe. So you want to embrace the demagogue's ignorance. And when portraying them, again, a lot of times we want characters to be sophisticated. We want them to be well-informed, especially if we're like portraying them as kind of an upper tier villain. But you throw that out with this character. That's not the case. They don't know accurate history, and they don't care. And they don't need to be effective. In fact, the more that they're willing to prevaricate and obfuscate and dissemble, the more effective they become a lot of times, especially if you have a populace that, like in the terror setting for the Darkeport campaign, the vast majority of the population is not literate, so they don't really know what happened more than a couple generations, and you're typically dead by 40 or 50, so you don't really know what happened before. You certainly don't know what happened on the other side of the world, and this all serves the demagogue. And in any society in decline where the educational system is not up to snuff, and where the reading comprehension and all of that, again, these are all green lights for the demagogue. This all means that they can plant their seed and see results with a higher probability of success. So the demagogue's narrative is everything, and this is another version of play fast and loose with the truth, but specifically in this way, they're very disciplined, or even if it's just instinct, they really can drive a narrative, and they can drive it hard. And the narrative then takes on a life of its own. And so they just, and as we continue, well, yeah, and so part of that is like repeating. I was trying to see the research on this, but regardless of what the actual number is, you just want to keep repeating and repeating and repeating the same 3 or 4 lines again and again, and just and 3 or 4 points, and just basically through sheer force of will and repetition get other people to believe in these things. And then the crowd, as soon as the crowd accepts it, as soon as the crowd accepts the demagogue, they will accept the rest of the pablum that the demagogue is feeding them. So you have that. This demagogue never ever have them apologize for anything. They may well know that they're in error, but they're not going to do that publicly, and they're not going to give you a public apology, because that goes back to they're keenly aware of their image, and part of their image, and this feeds into another point, is projecting strength. Now, they may actually be a ferocious person with a high willpower score, if the game has that, etc. I guess I should note here that a lot of times I'll break scores into different subcategories. So like with wisdom, this one maybe the most. With wisdom, I will often have interpersonal perspicacity, like how perceptive the person is, and how well they can read and understand other humans. And then I have grit or willpower, because you can have someone who's very stubborn and very difficult to like influence with a charm spell, who really couldn't care less about other people and doesn't pay attention to them and really picks up on none of the nuance or subtlety of life. And those are, and in like 5th edition, well, in all editions of D&D, it's just wisdom, because you only have 6 scores. So those are really 2 different scores that in real life don't correlate much to each other. Obstinacy and like empathy, they don't really correlate that well. Let's see what else. So save that to the last one. Make a virtue of their ignorance. And if the demagogue shows others that being ignorant is the way, that being ignorant is entertaining, that being ignorant is the way that you stick it to the powers that be, etc., becomes a virtue. It becomes an act of resistance. It becomes a way of, if you're one of this disaffected, one of the disaffected population, it becomes a way of reclaiming your power and being relevant again. And even on a very basic level, just existing and counting for something. And, who doesn't want to count for something? So I suppose you could say there's even like an element of seduction in all of this that is of another really powerful subtext tool of the demagogue. Seduction, writ large, not in a very narrow sense, but just in terms of making it attractive on multiple levels for the people that this person is speaking to and addressing. Oh, right. And then this one would be optional, but I probably more often than not this would be the case. And it would be in terms of the mentality of the demagogue. People only have worth in terms of how much value you can extract from them. So even though they're putting on this potential facade of compassion, like I said, if they have some level of compassion, off and on. I know, I was saying earlier that a key point in differentiating them from the visionary is that they lack true compassion, but they might have moments of it or flashes of it. So this isn't necessarily true 100% of the time. But for the demagogues where this is true, the world is just in terms of what others are only just in terms of what they can do for you, or what you can absorb from them, or what you can drain off of them, or whatever. So it's a really mercenary way of looking at humanity. And then finally, the one that I wanted to the affect of the demagogue that I wanted to save to the end, one of my best pieces of advice in general, and this definitely applies to the demagogue, is to pick a person in history, and in this case specifically pick a speaker in history, listen to them or read them if they predate recorded media. But really, if you can, pick one that you can listen to so you can hear the cadence of their voice, you can hear the rhythm, you can hear the tenor. There's all kinds of stuff that is very difficult to translate from just the written word, and mimic them, steal shamelessly from them. And adapt it, of course. You can change it however you like, but that kind of gives you the backbone of what their public persona is and what their public speaking presentation is like and approach. And I already alluded to this before, but you want to find just a handful of key phrases that are peculiar to that character. And that as soon as the players hear you utter one of these phrases, like they're walking into a scene, or there's a crowd or something, they're walking into the scene and they hear it, they can't even see the speaker, however it goes, but like they immediately associate with this particular demagogue. It's almost like a spoken leitmotif. So instead of a musical cue, you have a spoken cue, and that signals who and what they are. And something, if you can get a good catchy slogan, it's even better, like bonus points for that, because then that's something that you can have the crowd just chanting, again and again and again. Portraying crowds is hard. It's a different discussion because, obviously you can't just, you can only schmeagle yourself out so many times. So having any group activity where they can just kind of be, slack-jawed and mouth breathing and swaying back and forth and repeating it back to the demagogue. Of course, that's, I'm poking a bit of fun, but that really depends on the crowd. Sometimes they can be quite vigorous and active, and you can be whipping them up into a mob, and then that's another potential power of the demagogue is that you can have the players become the target of their ire, and then you're dealing with mob situations, and if it's in their hometown, the PCs don't necessarily want to, drop a fireball in a crowd or something. They may want to try to find other ways to contain them or to deal with, or they may even be forced to flee. It depends. All right, I hope that has been helpful for you. There was a passage in the book that I referred to last time, The First Man in Rome, that I was trying to find. Colleen McCullough writes a beautiful demagogue, and I think I didn't find it, but I think I want to read the passage that I did. There's a little bit of in-universe lore, but not too bad. And again, if historical fiction is your bag at all, this is the best stuff. And to me, this paragraph is birth of the demagogue. This is really getting into the mind. One by one, the 20 candidates standing for election as tribunes of the plebes declared themselves, while Marius stood by watchfully. First to do so was the presiding tribune, Lucius Apuleius Saturninus, and the whole vast crowd began to cheer him deafeningly, a reception which clearly amazed him, Marius discovered, shifting to where he could keep his eyes on Saturninus's face. I keep wanting to say Saturnius, but there's an extra N in there. On Saturninus's face. Saturninus was thinking intransparently. What a following this was for one man. What might he not be able to do with 300,000 Roman lowly at his back? Who would ever have the courage to keep him out of the tribunate of the plebes when this monster cheered its approval? Stay safe out there. Valet.